Miles, let's start off with my conversation that I wrote about in my Football Morning in America column this week with Chicago general manager Ryan Poles. And so Ryan Poles is obviously in his second year. He's in his mid-30s. He's a very kind of optimistic, sort of quiet guy, but he's a very much of a football traditionalist. He played football at Boston College, and then obviously he started on the scouting trail soon after he left BC. And so he basically has risen through the ranks, and this is his first big deal. And I sat with him for about 50 or 60 minutes on Saturday morning in his hotel room, 19 floors above downtown Indy. And I got the impression that if you want to make a deal with Ryan Poles right now, you're going to have to blow him away. Otherwise, he's going to wait and he's going to let teams get more and more excited about these quarterbacks. Another reason why you need to wait until the end of March when teams get to meet with these guys and a coach says to his general manager, I really want CJ Stroud. Let's see what we can do to try to move up to get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young or whatever. But Miles, your thoughts on the Bears at number one and how much of a hard bargain can they afford to drive right now?
I think they're in a great spot. I mean, because even though these quarterbacks are flawed, a lot of teams still need one. And, coaches sometimes say, if I see a player do something once, I can coach him to do that a bunch of times. So you can coach out the flaws, basically, right? So if you fall in love with one of these guys, you go on a workout, you put them on the board, and you see that quarterback do this, and you guys are speaking the same language. And basically, as you were just saying, Peter, you fall in love with that guy, then you're going to want to trade up because you want to make sure you get him, because once you get the franchise QB, then everything else can fall into place around that. And if it takes 2 first-round picks, if it takes 3 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks and a third and a fourth or whatever it is, you want to do that because it means that you've got the guy. And once you have the guy, you're in a much better position than you would be otherwise. So from that perspective, the Bears think that they already have their guy. Right? Ryan Poles makes it pretty clear that they want to see things through with Justin Fields. And when you see the kind of explosive plays that Justin Fields put out there last year, you absolutely understand that. So it's so interesting now that, if not for the Texans making that comeback against the Colts, then we're having a completely different conversation right now here at the beginning of March than we are. And, if you're the Chicago Bears, yeah, maybe there would be some interest at number 2 overall. But from number 1 overall, you've got the Texans still right there at number 2, and they would probably want to be able to go up to number 1, maybe not trade as much as they would have to if they were further back, so that they can ensure that they get the quarterback that they want. And then if you're the Bears and you're at number 2, well, then why wouldn't you want to necessarily look at who can come up in that top 10 and get the quarterback that they want, but you don't want to go too far, right? I mean, maybe you want to go down to 4. Maybe you want to go down to 7. Maybe you don't want to get past there because, as Ryan Poles was saying to you, they don't want to lose one of their blue chip players, right? Those top guys that they've got rated on their draft board, and they don't have, more than 10 of them. So there are a lot of things that the Bears can do right now to ensure that they get maximum value for that number 1 overall pick. But yeah, if I'm Ryan Poles, I want to make it known I am open for business, as he did with you. And we'll see if somebody can come in and absolutely blow me away to make sure that they get the guy that they want. And it allows us as the Chicago Bears to then build our future with a bunch of high picks.
I think one of the things that you just said is something that I've thought a lot about ever since I walked out of that room with Ryan Poles, and that is building the future with high picks. Because if you think about it, there's a very good chance that for as long as Ryan Poles is a general manager in the NFL, He will never have an opportunity like this in his life, ever, not even close. So here's what the only reason I bring that up is that, in my opinion, because of what we have seen in the last few years, okay, and I'm going to bring up one as an example because I had somebody, let's just call him somebody with knowledge of the Carolina Panthers thinking, tell me last night, my last phone call of the weekend, tell me last night that I wouldn't be so sure about David Tepper, going so all in on one of these quarterbacks because they think that Chicago is basically going to ask you to denude 3 drafts to get this quarterback. And although you're nowhere if you don't get a quarterback, there's also the thought that if you don't have people to put around him, if you don't have enough offensive skill players to put around him, should you really be trading for this quarterback in this? But I'll just make this point. So going from number 9 to number 1, which Carolina would have to do to take the kind of player that it really hopes to be able to take. If you equate that, try to think of a trade, in my opinion, something that could be very close to that is in 2021, Miami and San Francisco trading so that San Francisco moved up from 12 to 3. Now, 12 to 3 is pretty similar to 9 to 1, except if there's an Andrew Luck or a Peyton Manning or whatever involved in the draft, or Joe Burrow, that there's almost a singular person at the top of the draft. There really isn't that this year. So I can equate these two things. And just think about this. When Miami traded down from 3 to 12, think about what they got in return. They got the 12th overall pick in 2021. They got first and third round picks in 22, and they got a first round pick in 23. Right now, and they picked Trey Lance.
Mm-hmm.
I will not take to go that number of picks. I absolutely unequivocally would not take less than that if I were trading from 1 to 9. So in other words, if I'm Ryan Poles, I am saying, let's just put this on a scale and measure it. If a team is going to give 3 1s and a 3 to move up from 12 to 3, you've got to be able to say the exact same thing to move from 9 to 1. And maybe you've even got to give a little bit more, like a 2 instead of a 3. So again, I think Ryan Poles is going to get a landmine is going to get a gold mine of picks for this guy. And if I'm him, I am taking it right up to the end. And if I don't get my offer, if somebody chickens out, he told me he's already got a 24 and 20. He's got first rounders in 24 and 25 on the table. And if I can't do better than that, maybe when it gets to be you're on the clock with your pick that day, maybe you say, am I going to take it, or am I just going to sit where I am and take Will Anderson, the pass rusher from Alabama? So in my opinion, Ryan Poles in the driver's seat. I would love my position if I were him right now.
I mean, you could do worse than taking Will Anderson, right? I mean,
absolutely.
That looks like a guy who is going to be an absolute impact player in this league. And I think we know that when you're looking at defenses, you need that kind of dynamic pass rushing presence, whether it comes from the interior like the Rams with Aaron Donald, or it's the edge with guys like Nick Bosa or whoever, right? Or Chris Jones is also an interior guy. I feel like I should mention because he just won the Super Bowl. You need that. So if you're building your team and you want more high picks, you need the Chicago Bears. Absolutely, that's something you want. But if you got to pick number one overall and it's Will Anderson, that's not a bad thing at the end of the day. At least that's what I think.
So there's two teams. I had many conversations about teams and who might trade up when I was in Indianapolis. And one of the teams that's thinking about it, one of a veteran, let's just say a veteran front office person for this team said, we're tired of the Band-Aids. So think about that, Miles. What teams in the top 10 would be most tired of the Band-Aids? Number one, Indianapolis. Yeah. They've had 5 different starting quarterbacks in the last 5 years. I mean, on opening day, they've had a different starting quarterback 5 straight years. And then the Carolina Panthers, who essentially have an owner who's very impatient, very wealthy, and just wants this problem solved. And so when I look at the Carolina Panthers, the one thing I say is that, and we saw it with Stephen Ross in Miami, we've seen it with other owners who are fabulously wealthy. They think, I'm going to throw money at this problem and I need to make it go away. It's a little different with the quarterback market, but I just think that my gut feeling, it's going to be Carolina or the Indianapolis Colts, who probably will want to give the most to move up to number one.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially you're talking about the Colts and the Band-Aids and everything that's gone on since Andrew Luck suddenly retired has just been this kind of weird and kind of bad merry-go-round, right? Phillip Rivers was effective in the year that he was with the Colts. Obviously, they made it to the postseason. But then you look at Carson Wentz, right? You look at Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz wasn't as much of a disaster until the end of the season. Matt Ryan was a disaster of a free agency, of a trade that they made to acquire him, right? That just did not work. And frankly, it might have cost a lot of general managers their job, but Chris Ballard is still there. And so he's got another shot with Shane Steichen. And I think we know enough about Shane Steichen's coaching to know that he can train up a young guy. Look at what he did with Justin Herbert. And look at what he did with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia, really completely retooling that offense for the specific quarterback, calling plays for the specific quarterback. I think that bodes well for what could happen with Indianapolis, whether they go up and they trade and maybe they get to number one, maybe they get to number two if they have to, whatever it happens to be, if the Texans happen to move up to number one. But I think that they're in a pretty decent spot, either at number 4 or if they move up, to get a quarterback and get that guy on the right track, in part because of who they have as their head coach.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the biggest thing to consider going forward when you try to figure out who might make that deal, what coach will be exceedingly motivated to make the deal. I think Frank Reich will be. What owner will be exceedingly motivated? Obviously David Tepper, and then I also look at the Indianapolis Colts. Chris Ballard, man, this is like this is the last dance for Chris Ballard. He's got to get this right with this quarterback. And also the new coach, Shane Steichen, he didn't come in to have Sam Ehlinger be his starting quarterback. So there's going to be some major changes there. And Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, clearly is going to want a huge upgrade at quarterback.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.